Good evening and welcome to the Special Education Advisory Committee meeting of the Halton District School Board for Tuesday, June 2nd. Given the COVID-19 pandemic, our school closures, and the need to practice social distancing, we are holding this meeting remotely through video conferencing. This meeting is now being recorded. The Vice Chair will start with a roll call to record who is in attendance. Please answer yes or present. Joanna?
Okay, thank you. From Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton, we have regrets from Diane Van de Bosch. Allison Brindle.
Present.
From Voice, Judy Shields. I don't think she's on the line. We've members at large, James Baldwin. Is James on the line?
Don't forget to unmute, James.
Looking to see if James is logged in.
He is here. I can see his name.
Okay, yes, I do see. Okay, he's logged in. Another member at large, Diane Miller. I think Diane Miller is on the line. I see her logged in. Yep. Okay.
So sorry, Joanna. There's Diana. But James, if you look at the bottom, there should be a picture of a microphone. If you click on it, it will mute and unmute you.
Right, present, Joanna.
Okay. Association for Bright Children, Deidre Wu. No. Heddle Shaw. No. Is everything okay? Because I'm seeing. Hello? Okay.
I think we're good, Joanna.
Autism Ontario, Lisa Cameron? No. Easter Seal Society, Melissa Dockery? Yes?
Yeah, here.
Okay. Halton Down Syndrome Association, Sophia Siddiqui.
Yep, I'm here.
And do we have Mike Brown as well?
Don't see him.
No.
I think not today.
Okay. Lucille's here. And with us also, we have trustees Margot Shuttleworth.
Here I am.
Tracy L. Harrison.
Hello, everyone.
Great. And Heather Garretts.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening. Okay, and with us tonight, we have, of course, Superintendent Mark Zonneveld, and we have Sean Marks, and we have Director Stuart Miller. Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Okay, we will begin honoring the land. Joanna?
Okay. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of many First Nations and the Métis, from the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions: land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. At First Nation for sharing traditional territory with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. We now need to move on to the approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting. Could I have somebody to move a motion to approve the agenda?
Okay, Diane Miller, would you like to approve the agenda?
Yes, approved.
Okay. And Sophia Siddiqui, would you like to second?
Yep.
Great.
Okay. Next up is the approval of our May 5th meeting minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? And if you wish to speak, please indicate so in the chat box. Could I have a motion?
Allison, would you like to move the motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move the motion to approve, yes.
Okay, and James, would you like to second that motion? Okay, we have a second. Great.
Okay, all in favor? Are there any objections? Okay, then I will go ahead and approve the minutes. Thank you. We are now moving to the action portion of the agenda. And the first item is the special education plan, the final draft. And Mark?
Good evening, everyone. Before I start, I know Director Miller is on the line with us. And Stuart, do you want to say a few words before you head off to your next meeting?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I just want to really, this is the last SEAC of the year, of the school year, and it's been an extraordinary school year indeed. And I want to publicly thank the members of SEAC and the trustees for their work in helping us support our students with special needs and to keep our eye on the ball during a really difficult time. I know that there has probably been slip-ups and some big challenges in addressing the needs of some of our kids in these difficult circumstances, but we really transformed education in a very short period of time and had never anticipated being able to support kids with needs in this kind of environment. So I'm proud of the work we've done. I'm proud of the work that SEAC has done for us and on our behalf, and has guided us and counseled as well. So I just really wanted to thank you all for your work and sticking with it when it's more difficult. I guess in these times it's even more important that people step up and stick with it than in normal times. So I really want to thank all of the members of SEAC for the work. I also want to thank Sean and Mark and their entire staff. I know they've spent countless hours trying to work with CERTs and EAs and social workers to do their best to ensure that our students with needs, if they lost very little, but to mitigate, it's not perfect, but I think they did a fantastic job in mitigating the worst of it and have supported kids well. So I want to thank them, and of course the trustees as well. And that's all I really have to say, Lucille and Mark. It's really, I'm grateful to everyone for their work, and hopefully in September we'll be able to meet in person again and really start to work out, do better work, I guess is the best way to describe it. So thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so we'll take a look at our first action item, which is the approval of the final draft of the special education plan. I know that Lorna sent out quite a few attachments with our agenda email on Friday. There are quite a few things to look at, but if you've had a chance to look at the one titled Original 2020-21 SPED Plan, that's the doc that I'm talking about right now. And you will recall that we brought this to you in February as the initial draft of our plan for next year, where we brought all of the proposed changes for the next year. So what you're seeing now, this version, all of those changes are still there that you saw in February. And you'll recall that pretty well all of those were really just either housekeeping items, if there's changes in terms or language, and if there are anything that changed with our community partners, those kinds of things were reflected. But really, we didn't have a lot of changes to that version. That's similar again with this one. So what you're seeing now, if you have this doc on screen like I do, if you go to the very end of it, that's where the last appendices is. That's where the last appendix. That is the Appendix R is the summary of amendments, which we include every year to show what's changed from the the current plan to next year's. So what you're seeing here, this may look longer, but it includes both the changes that we made in February and now these final ones. So there are, once again, very few things here that aren't housekeeping or just language changes. The things I think we want to talk about most tonight are the changes that are impacted by the proposed budget. So I say the proposed or draft budget because we're in such unusual times that here we are at the beginning of June, we still don't have our budget from the ministry. This is highly unusual. I haven't seen this in my dozen or so years as a superintendent, that we have not had the budget by now. So that is a function of the times that we're in. The ministry has told us that we may not see our grants for student needs, the GSNs, until July or even August maybe. So as a board, we're doing the best we can to plan without a final budget. So in the special education plan are a few things that we've included if the money comes, that we're hoping to come. And so I'll point to those. If you're looking at standard 12 in the summary of amendments, so that's the third page of Appendix R, you'll see on the first line, there is the addition of learning disability reading support teachers. So I shared that with you at our last SEAC meeting, that we're hoping to add these teachers to be able to provide supports to students and staff in supporting students with learning disabilities in improving their reading skills. We are also hoping to add some additional ABA facilitators. Those are also included in this standard 12 list. And I also wanted to point you to, I'm just trying to find it on our list. Right in the very middle of that box, you'll see added specialized behavior support workers. You may recall that we talked about adding these staff that are very specifically, they have specific skills and training and education background in working with students with externalized behaviors. And we're hoping that we can add one of each of these staff to our behavior resource classes. So those are also included there. And I think those are the big pieces that come from the budget. Also including, if you recall in our discussions last month, I talked about adding more self-contained classes. Those are included there as well, but those show up in basically in the numbers of classes that we have. All of those numbers we update once the budget's approved, all those numbers will be updated in the special ed plan, once again, depending on the outcome of the budget. So those are the big changes that you will see there in the plan. Otherwise, the rest of them are all basically language. Nothing there is a change that would be a change in program that we haven't talked about. No changes in services or supports. There's nothing there that's a surprise. So I think I'll stop there, and I'd be happy to take any questions on this final version. The regulation does require that SEAC does indicate its support for the plan or not, and indicate that for trustees, so that trustees know that going into their budget deliberations. So we do need to do a vote of the voting members tonight of SEAC to show support for the plan or not. And then we'll carry that on and share that, the outcome of that vote with trustees later on. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, I see that Margot and Allison have a question.
All right, thank you. My question is pertaining to page 8, which talks about the minority report that was submitted. And when I click, I can't find that minority report. And I don't know, Allison might be able to help me out with this, because I know it was from the Learning Disabilities Association of Halton and Hamilton that submitted the minority report. But my understanding of the most recent minority report was for the 2018-19 year?
1920.
Okay, so then where is it?
So that section on minority reports and that appendix only has minority reports if there are any associations that wish to submit one. So it sits empty every year at this time. It sits blank for next year until we receive, if we receive any minority reports, then they get added to the plan.
Okay,
so
sorry, Mark. So on page 8, it says a minority report was submitted. And then in brackets, it says see appendix. And the corresponding response from the chair of the board found in appendix. It says this item is pending. So I'm just wondering where it is, if we're able to see it.
Okay, so there isn't one yet. So number one, we have to have a vote. Okay, that'll happen tonight. If all the associations support the plan, then there is no minority report.
Okay.
And so that section will be removed.
Okay.
In any reference to it.
Okay.
If there, okay, and then so depending on the outcome of the vote, and then those we've had minority reports added at different times, depending on when we get those from associations. It could come in the summer, it could come in the fall. You know, the one for last year we didn't have until, just recently. So whenever it gets added, with this being an online document, we simply add it to that appendix if and when it comes.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So I'm just looking at some correspondence I have here. I'm just trying to pull it up. Hold on. I think it's it's not coming up. Oh, there it is, opening. Give me 1 minute while my computer catches up with me.
So the minority report we recently received was for this current plan, right? Which was voted on last June. We recently received the minority report from LDAH.
For the last year.
For this current year.
Correct. So this report is for the upcoming year. So the report is concerned with the last year.
Correct.
Okay, that's my question. So I'm done. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Okay, Allison, you had a question?
Okay, yes. All right. So thank you. And I'm sure we're going to answer or have some questions that will help determine whether we're able to. So some questions for Mark. I just want to clarify. It's my understanding that the KELP program is for kindergartens with learning disabilities. The ALPHA program is a grade 1 program for which students with learning disabilities are considered if they have phonological awareness problems.
Correct.
The itinerant teachers that you have in the budget, are they going to be directed to any particular grades, or because we have a gap for grades 2 and 3?
So I appreciate your question, because we've been meeting about that quite a bit recently. If you can appreciate, as the budget gets closer and closer to approval, and once again, this is such an odd year, but in a normal year, as the budget gets closer and closer to approval, we as staff get a better idea of, will something be included or not, right? Something that we thought might have been included in April, by June doesn't make the cut for a whole variety of reasons, and other things get added. So right now we still have these teachers in the budget, so we've been planning with that in mind. And so our first focus for them is to support our learning disabilities classes. We have 32 of those in our system, and so we want to make sure that those teachers are really well trained, well equipped to be able to offer great programs that support students with LDs learning to read. So that's our first priority. Then we are, and we're still working out there what their time would look like, how much they would be giving to each class through the course of a week, how much training those teachers will get, the follow-up from these other itinerant teachers, etc. So that's part of what we're working out. If they have time, they will also support the alpha classes in there's a lot of what we want the LD teachers being able to do, we want our alpha teachers to be able to do as well. So we are looking at that. We're also looking at training our alpha teachers in some of the same skills in terms of that phonological awareness and how that applies to the teaching of, that structured approach to teaching reading. So if we can include that in them in our training, then they may not need as much support from those itinerant LD teachers, if you follow that rationale, if we train our alpha teachers as well. And then, time allowing again, these teachers are itinerant, and so there are some students for whom we know that by grades 2, 3, even 4, Allison, that aren't reading yet and should be, and have a learning disability. And so therefore we want these teachers to be able to work in those schools with those certs and teachers to help them build their skills to do that as well. So that's kind of it's a pretty tall order, and we again, because this is brand new, we want to see how well we can do this. That's sort of the tier of how we want to approach this. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, you've made some wonderful progress in terms of the CELT program and the Alpha program. There is that gap at grades 2 and 3, where we are concerned that students who don't have a program and don't yet fit into the gifted classroom, or the self-contained classrooms, are getting missed. And we would like to see support for students in grades 2 and 3 to offer a continuity of service. So that is a priority for us. I guess my question is, when it comes to supporting the plan, and the same must be said for, I think, everybody, is we're being asked to support a plan that we don't know there's any money to provide. So, I mean, if our association says, yes, this is wonderful, and we support it, and then in 2 months down the road, you don't have any of this money, we're back to square one.
Mark, can I jump in there?
Sure, Stuart.
I have a couple of conference calls per week, one with and the chair of the board is also on that one with me, with the Minister of Education. And then I have another one with the Ministry of Education with the Deputy Minister every Thursday morning. And yesterday was the one with the Minister. And the indication so far is the GSNs and the budget is, and I'm qualifying it a little bit, Allison, but the GSNs, along with the wage increases that have been negotiated in the collective bargaining, have all been put into it. but they're looking at other areas for boards to tighten belts a little bit because the province is going to have some challenges. But they said what they're really looking at is in non-direct student areas. I don't know in a board of education what that means, because you can make an argument everything's direct student, right? But so we're not quite sure exactly what it means, but it sounded relatively confident to me that we will see the money we had anticipated. But of course, the other challenge now, though, will be we may have additional costs in preparing for September that were unanticipated. Things like buying sanitizer, buying plastic shields for bus drivers and things like that, which we don't know yet. So I hope that gives you a slightly better indication, Allison. I know that's not certainly carved in stone, but that's what we've been told on those calls. So Mark, I hope that helps a wee bit.
Thanks, Stuart.
I see Diane's question, or are you, Mark, did you?
Maybe I'll just say, Allison, I appreciate the concern, and maybe it's no consolation. This is the same case every year, right? And I guess most years it doesn't matter, because we're pretty confident by June to be able to say to you, this is the budget, right?
Yeah.
We've narrowed things down with trustees and with staff, and we have our grants, and we're pretty confident to be able to say, here we are in June, this is what the budget will look like. Maybe there'll be a slight change by the time it's voted upon, but this is it. But this year is so unusual. I think you've got as much of a reassurance as you're going to get from Stuart, because we're just in such an odd place.
Yes, and I certainly appreciate that. I mean, it's a very difficult time for everybody. So, you know, as far as the Learning Disabilities Association goes, if there is if there are itinerant teachers available to teach grades 2 and 3, and if there are self-contained classrooms, and I know that you've added more, then with additional EAs and all the things that you've put forward in the budget, then we are prepared to support the plan.
Great.
And we certainly appreciate the effort that you've put in to supporting the needs of our students.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay.
I think Diane is next.
I had a very similar question to Allison, so I think it has been answered. My concern when you were talking about standard 12 and not knowing the budget until July or potentially August, that was concerning, but I understand from Stuart the reassurances that he's being given, and hopefully those funding will be there. I guess my question is, what happens if they're not there, or if they're reduced from what the expectation is?
So I would suggest that if that happens, and if SEAC really wants to revisit this in September, that we could do that. And if the purpose of a minority report is to be able to show publicly the concern that an association has for the plan. So if we want to revisit this in September, and an association wants to say, you know what, we have these reservations now of how the plan sits because the budget isn't what we all thought it would be, then I think that after the fact, you could still indicate that, and we could include that in the appendices. I'm suggesting that would be up to the will of the group, I would think, and we'd have to maybe check the legislation, but I think that would be in the spirit of the.
And Mark, can I just say something? Diane, we haven't been told exactly when, but we've been told that the budget will obviously be coming, the GSNs and from the province will be coming later. We've informed our trustees that we are very likely well, not very likely, we will be having at least one board meeting in July, perhaps more, and perhaps August. And I guess I would look to the trustees at SEAC and that if the budget was, the GSNs and all that was radically different than what we've anticipated, I would imagine the trustees would want to reach out to SEAC for some input into some changes that we would be recommending around the budget. And again, I do want to emphasize we're quite concerned around additions to the budget that we may have to put in September around addressing the new realities of COVID around busing and all that other stuff. But I would look to one of the trustees to perhaps comment on that as well. But that's how I would envision it.
Okay, and thank you. And I appreciate there will be probably additional costs, as you say, come the fall, depending on how the safety concerns around COVID-19 will play out. So that was just my concern. The other one I just wanted to ask about, I know this was a question that was asked and I wasn't at the last meeting, but with the KELP and the ALPA programs, people that were a part of that program and then because of COVID-19, they're no longer in that program or going to be able to finish it out. I know there's a small amount, I guess 10 students in the KELP program when I was reading through the documents. So how does that play out then for the next year or stand the student in good stead moving forward if the program wasn't able to be completed? And I know they can't necessarily move into the program next year because, of course, there's a wait list or other children coming into kindergarten, etc. So sort of, I guess, what's the plan B, or how are those students supported to bring them up to where they would have been without the interruption?
Great question, Diane. I've had, I think, 3 parents approach me about this. Again, concerned that their children missed a certain amount of time because of our labor disruptions. If you recall the days that we weren't in school then, and now with the school closure. So the challenge is that we've been doing our intake process all through the year in the lead up, getting ready to plan for who's going to be in those programs in September, and we have a full cohort of students ready to go in those classes in September. So the classes are full with new students, and if we kept those students currently in there going forward, then we would be taking spots from those new students coming in. So, I think you've heard through Stuart in the budget that the ministry isn't giving us any new funding because of COVID to deal with situations like this. So we have no funding to pay for additional classes. These classes are quite costly to run with the low ratios. So, what my response to parents has been that we're trying to support them as well as we can now in this virtual environment. We're doing transition planning with those students and families for those students going into back into a regular class in the fall, and we'll work with that homeschool in using some of those same skills and strategies with those students back in their home schools. But unfortunately, we can't keep them for another year or another term because then we're taking that spot away from another student who's ready to come in and has those needs as well. So that's the reality, and that's how we'll support those students going into September.
So with those skills or tools, will that expectation be of the home school teacher to try and do that, or would that be through an EA? Because I know with the classrooms and perhaps changes with COVID-19, what does that look like with that being added on in the homeschool to the teacher in addition to her classwork?
Yeah, another great question, Diane. We all know there's so many unknowns for September. Right now, the plan is that those students will be back in their home schools. We have staffed our schools with EAs and CERTs and teachers anticipating those students with special needs will be there. And then depending on what's, I'll give you a what if. What if in September classes are only half the size and students come every other week? Just as an example, I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but just do a what if. Then we will adjust our staffing as needed based on what students are coming at what times. So might we have more supports available for students if classes are half the size? Maybe. Depends on what the other students are doing when they're at home virtually. Might we shift staffing between schools depending on those needs? We might. I think there's a lot of unknowns that once we get a clarity on the model for September, then we'll have a better idea of how we need to staff schools to support kids. So we're very conscious of who's where. We're planning on these students being in their home schools in a regular class, and we will support accordingly.
Thank you.
Hi, I just wanted to respond to the comment made by Stuart around the release of the budget and trustees connecting with SEAC. So yeah, that thank you for putting that out there. I know that once we have a sense of the funding that's allocated, all trustees will be very interested in special education funding, and in particular the four of us who are SEAC members. And I think regardless of where things are at, we'll want to touch base with SEAC and let the committee know what all transpired and what the status is. So that's something that we will be doing. Thank you.
I think Margot is next, and then Deirdre.
Hi, so this, I was going to wait till later to ask in the question and answers, but I do know from conversations we've had is that the ministry is asking for input on the next steps in going back to school. So I do think that there is a place for us as SEAC to formulate a response to concerns that we might have as far as that safe return to school. I will bring this back up during questions and answers, but I did think that in response to what kind of the conversation that's been going on now, that we need to be starting to think about how we as a group want to respond to the government's call for information or for advice as to how to move forward. So, over.
Sure, we can talk about that more during the question period. Sure. Deirdre, I think you're next. I think you're still on.
Hi, can you hear
Hi
me
there.
okay?
Yeah.
Hi, sorry for showing up late. I had some technical difficulties. So I'm just taking a look at the report and noting regarding the test for giftedness and just the very specific statement here regarding test for giftedness happens for grade 4 when you do the grade-wide testing. And when we spoke earlier this year about no teacher putting forward for grade 1, and we went a little bit further into how parents would have to bring that forward, and then of course grade 1 self-contained would still be there, as well as grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5 going forward. There's nothing noted here that I can see regarding those other young elementary grades. Could you just comment on that a little bit for me, please?
Sure. Can you point me to the right standard just to make sure we're talking about the same thing?
Sure. It's on page, we're talking about early assessments. So I have to, of course, find it again here. So it's going back into early assessments. So we're talking about kindergarten assessments, and it talks about gifted assessments and identification. And it just says that the Halton School Board tests giftedness in grade 4, but it doesn't mention anything about any other earlier assessments or placements at all.
Okay,
So I just wanted to clarify that.
So are you on page 37 for the screening for giftedness? Is that what you're looking at? It talks about the screening.
Yep, that's exactly where I am. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so so that is specifically there because that is the use of the CCAT, right? The cognitive assessment that we use. But then that's a screening. And to clarify, screening is that we administer that with all grade 4 students, right?
Yes,
Whereas whereas the referral by staff, and it can be a request from parents as well about a psychological assessment at any grade, isn't specifically about giftedness. It's about
agreed. Yes.
That problem-solving process that we engage in, right? So that's why it doesn't talk about that specifically, but it's an option for all students with that problem-solving. Your question about mentioning the availability of classes and programs, if you scroll down to page 63, I believe it is, make sure I've got this right. Oh, sorry, 64. You look, oh no, sorry, 63. There you see a chart that lists all of our self-contained placements and programs, and there's giftedness in the middle, and it shows grades 1 to 8 as included in what's offered for those classes. So the plan is a little, kind of has different things in different places. You have to kind of know where to look for everything, but it's a requirement.
Through that whole section regarding kindergarten and assessment by teachers, there's a lot of detail on a lot of other aspects for other exceptionalities. And then the only statement there regarding gifted screening, within that section, the only statement there just says we do a grade-wide screening in grade 4. So that was kind of just a in-your-face statement that I was just a little concerned about, considering the changes that were made just over this past year. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just want to
go back and sure.
Make
yeah,
sure
I have to
that
go
that
back
is.
and look at. Yeah. So certainly, if you're concerned that that is available still as part of that problem-solving process, it absolutely is.
Yes. Yes, I know that it's definitely still there. I just want to make sure that going forward, it's still highlighted for parents. I've seen a lot of chatter about it, to questions about whether or not the program's still there, concerned parents, because it's not talked a lot about, and I don't know if there's maybe some miscommunication with a lot of the certs as well, whether or not it's supposed to be not necessarily enforced, but that's the wrong word, but maybe widely discussed with parents or not. So I just want to make sure that that people know that the option is available for students of need who might need that. Yeah.
Sure. We've been clarifying that with our certs in their training that we've been doing. So
great.
We will continue to do that in the new year.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, there's a question from Allison, and
Yes, thank you. I'll just turn on my video. There we go. Can everybody see and hear me? I did have a question which Diane asked me to raise for you, Mark. In the assessments, she asked me to ask why the teacher school readiness inventory wasn't listed as being one of the assessments that's used. Because it's obviously based on teacher observation, but it has high validity and reliability when it comes to assessing students with learning disabilities. So she just wondered if that could be added into the assessments that are used. Yeah,
so the TSRI I'm trying to recall this now because we haven't used that for a couple of years. I'm not sure, Sean, if you're able to share any more insights on that. I think did we replace it with something else, Sean? Do you recall? It's not. It's more of a school programs tool that was used as opposed to a special education tool.
That's correct. It was in part replaced by the KAT, the CAT, but school programs dictates those assessments, and they are no longer using the TSRI.
Okay. All right. I will feed that information back.
Yeah, the CAT is the kindergarten assessment tool.
Okay. And then the other question I had, and it was raised a number of months ago, but obviously with COVID, things have got, there have been other priorities. But back when we all made the difficult decision to support the school board reduce the screening of gifted children in kindergarten and earlier stages, we did so on the premise that it would free up more psychologists to assess other exceptionalities. And I was wondering what data we have to show that there has been a reassignment of the psychologists and that the wait times have gone down for other exceptionalities, bearing in mind that the gifted program gave up so much for everybody else.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Allison. So I can come back to you with our wait times and show you what they look like from previous years to this year's. I'd have to, because I have been speaking with our psychology managers about this recently. It's a little bit hard to, it's not a true apples and apples comparison, and that's because our staffing for psychology has remained static for a few years now. We added a few more psychologists a few years ago, but they've stayed static for at least the last, I think, maybe 2 to 4 years. But our population has grown. So if you can appreciate that, with that, there's more demands on those staff. Also, we have brought in some changes to our reporting that our psychology staff do. We've tried to streamline their reports so that they spend less time writing reports and more time doing assessments. And we have now eliminated the need to do so many assessments through the gifted nomination process. So you have a number of these changes that have happened. And so that's why I'm not saying it's not static that we could compare, 3 years ago or last year our assessments to this year. So I can bring numbers for you in the fall, but it's not, everything else hasn't stayed the same with just the change in no primary process. Does that make sense?
But we could effectively assess how many hours were being spent on that gifted screening. Yep. If we've said we've now decreased the average time that it takes to do a screening, we could work out, okay, how many should we have done? And then in theory, we should have got an increase.
Yeah, sure. I can bring that data. So I can bring that to you in September. It's okay. I'm just trying to give perspective to it all. That's all.
It's complicated. I mean, I'm sure that having COVID has thrown a whole bunch of spanners in the works as well. So I recognize it's not easy, but as I said, bearing in mind that the gifted program did give up so much, and we were keen to see that the wait times went down for other exceptionalities, I think it would be beneficial to see if that had actually happened.
Yeah, for sure. I'll bring that in the fall.
Okay.
And there's a question from James and then Lisa.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I saw that on your superintendent report, Mark, that Erin Oak Autism Program is going to be closed. Does that have any bearing or effect on the original special education plan? Because I see through the plan, when I just gloss over it, some references to Erin Oak as if it's still functioning. but I don't know if it's
Yeah.
a multifaceted program that also serves other aspects of special education. So maybe you could clarify.
Sure. So Aaron Oak is a large organization. I'm not going to try and get the right term for what the ministry, because the ministry has been changing its relationship with those community providers, which is part of the reason why that specific class is closed. But Aaron Oak provides many services to students across our system, such as within our sorry, I'm going to mix up the language again, but the provision of devices for students with specific speech needs, communication needs in the early ages, for example. They provide that kind of resource. They also facilitate the supports that are funded provincially through the Ministry of Health. Those staff coming in, doing those kinds of supports. So it's not just about that one class, our relationship with Aaron Oak. Is that helpful? So even though the class is closed, they still are an important partner with us. And I think Deidre's next.
Hi there. Sorry, I just wanted to follow up on Allison's request. I'm wondering, Mark, if you could also bring us the information regarding enrollment into the self-contained program when you bring those numbers in September. So you're going to bring the testing numbers. Oh, sorry, you're going to bring us the number regarding testing for maybe the ones that are you were able to provide for the other exceptionalities that were taken away from potentially the gifted elementary, the early elementary. Could you maybe also just let me know what the numbers were going into the self-contained early elementary, out of curiosity, compared to previous years?
Sure,
That would
I
be
can
great.
bring those
Thank
too.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart.
Okay, are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any, so Lou, you might proceed.
You're on mute. You're on mute, Lou.
Hi, sorry. Okay, thank you everyone for a lively discussion. We're now moving on to 2.2.
Sorry, Lou, I need to interrupt, sorry. Before
Yeah.
we do that, though, we do need to hold a vote.
Oh, we haven't
Right.
hit our vote. Yes.
Right, we have to do a vote. So might I suggest that you go by
Yes.
each association?
Okay. All right, I'll do that. And can we please just have the voting member indicate whether they are in favor or opposed to the to the final draft of the special education plan? Okay, Learning Disabilities Association of Halton Hamilton.
We will approve the plan as it is drafted.
Thank you. Voice is not here. Members at large, James Baldwin
Approve.
and Diane.
Approve.
Association for Bright Children, Deidre.
Approve.
Did Lisa Cameron end up joining? I don't think so. Or autism? Okay. Easter Seals, Melissa Dockery.
Approved.
Halton Down Syndrome Association, Sophia.
Approved.
Lucille, does Lucille get to vote? Lucille and I, sorry. We do vote, correct? Mark?
Yes. Yeah, you get a vote. Yeah.
Approved.
Okay,
Approved.
and I approve as well. Thank you. All in favor? Approved.
I just wanted to quickly say how happy I am, or how pleased I am, that we have unanimous support for this vote this year. So that's it's
Yes.
just, so thank you. And thank you to everyone for working so hard to get to where we are today.
Thank you.
Okay, I will move forward then on to 2.2. And this is a discussion about parents' awareness of SEAC and the associations. And I'm wondering if anybody has anything to contribute on that discussion, into that discussion. I see Mark has his hand up.
So if you recall, we did talk about this maybe almost a year ago, and you did have some ideas about how we could improve awareness. So I just wanted to highlight what we had done in the meantime. And so what Lauren sent to you, this is some of the numerous attachments that you have with your email. One of them is a copy of the postcard that we hand out to all parents before they come to SRT. And that postcard, the attachment, it's a PDF attached to your email, and it's called Spec Ed Working Together Postcard. And so it highlights the Working Together document, which you may recall we revised a year or so ago. And it provides the link to that on our website. But at your suggestion, you also asked if we could include a mention of the Special Education Advisory Committee, which we also, so that's on the right side of that postcard with, again, a link to that on the board's website. So that's one of the things that we've done. So every family is getting one of these postcards when they come to SRT. Also, another attachment that Lorna included is the one called Mobile App Info. So if you open up that attachment, and it speaks to the new HDSB mobile app that we started almost 2 years ago, I guess, a year or two ago. And that's an app for the parents on their phones, and it's specific to each school. So when parents sign up for it, they get access to information that's general to all students in the board and families. And then they also get specific information for their children, depending on which school they're in. And if they're in multiple schools, then they will get information from all those schools. And it's a push app, meaning that the information is sent to them if they've logged, and they can tailor it a bit to them as well. But within that, there are a number of icons if you have that app on your phone, and one of them comes up is a link to the special education page on the board's website. So that's another way that we've tried to heighten the awareness and access to information for parents around special education. And then finally, there is, I'm just looking to see if we've included this or not. I don't think we have. Finally, since we last talked about this, we've redesigned and standardized all of the school web pages. So if you go to your child's school web page, and you go down to the bottom portion, there are, I believe, 8 large icons there that's standard to all the schools, and one of those is special education. So again, we're really trying to make that information readily accessible to families. So those are all things that we've done in the last while to make that that information more available. So this is on the agenda tonight because we thought we should highlight these things, but also open the dialogue, because I think this is something we said we would come back to and give the group the opportunity to maybe do some more group think, some brainstorming about how else could we make SEAC more, heighten parents' awareness, and maybe more specifically about your associations. Because I think the things I've talked about really try to put the spec ed in the hands of parents from a board standpoint. So maybe we could talk a bit about how to help parents be more aware of your associations and the supports they provide to families.
Mm-hmm. Mark, I see there's a question from Sophia regarding whether how we share the information about this app. And it's true, as I think back, I know we had a big launch spring of 2018, I guess, but I don't recall there being that kind of annual reminder to parents, especially, at the start of the new year with new families joining HDSB. And I'm not sure how prominent that is on our website either. I haven't looked at that in a bit. So that's something to definitely think about. I don't know, Sophia, did you have something more to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say, I've been on SEAC for a number of years now, and I had never heard about this app, unless I missed a meeting here or there, but I didn't know that this app even exists. I think it's great. It's a great way to get parents to be in touch, but I had never heard of it before today. So I think for sure, these things are awesome when they're created, but if we don't push it out to the system, then it's only like a small circle that knows about it. And it's like, I wonder if you look up stats to see how many people have actually downloaded the app. I'm curious.
Yeah, this isn't a spec ed app, right? It's a board app for parents.
Oh, it's a board app, yeah.
Right. So we haven't talked about it at SEAC. The information did go out. We sort of did a big blitz about it in, I think we said in September of 18. Let me just go back to this. Yeah, in the spring of 18 is when it went out. I know there are thousands of downloads and users. Again, the number I couldn't say. That all goes through our communication department, so I could go back and ask. But there, and I don't know if it goes out annually or not. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not aware of that well enough. But there was a big push when it first came out in the spring of 18.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great idea. So that's. And sorry, I had one more question in the chat for you, Mark, about the SRT. So you mentioned that families get a copy of the working together document. I think that's awesome, but does that actually happen in practice? Are they getting a hard copy, or are they giving a link emailed to them? How does that work?
So we asked schools, and they said the vast majority of parents want the electronic access. They don't want paper. So that's why they get the postcard, because the postcard has the website info that they can then go to on their phone or whatever. And then we've also printed copies and given those to every school for the families that say, I do want paper. So we've given schools the ability to present both options to families.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
I think James is next. James, you there?
Yeah, I just asked it in the chat. It's just basically kind of follow up on Sophia about whether there would be an ability to link that to either interpretation services for different languages or blurbs in different languages, that kind of thing, just to keep it accessible to new Canadians as well.
Yeah, thanks. This is an area that we're constantly working on. We have many of our documents have been translated. Unfortunately, we can't do all of them because the cost is really pretty exorbitant. And so we try to make sure, I think we're translating into 9 or 10 languages and try to do those for the documents that get the most traffic, if you want, that get the most use. And so I'm not sure where we're at in terms of which docs we've translated specifically within special education, but I can look at that. And I don't know if the app does that as well. It's a good question. I know we do encourage people to use Google Translate, but that's not always the most accurate, right? We do also use interpretive services. So we do hire interpreters to come to SRTs, to come to parent-teacher meetings, to make sure that we make that information accessible to parents as well. But it is an area that we're always trying to do the the interpretation. But I guess we're just conscious that if it's a document that we change a lot, James, that if we're paying for that translation, then we might have to do that with a lot of frequency, right? So we try and do it with docs that are more stable, if that makes sense, and then involve interpreters for things that have more fluid. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, and I see that Allison has a question.
Yep. Just hopefully, yep, here comes the video. Yes, just a couple of things. First of all, I think it would be a great idea if the app was publicized at the start of every school year. I was new back into the board last year, had absolutely no idea it existed. So, at the start of every school year, it would be a great way to introduce families and to get them more connected. So that would be one of my suggestions. Then secondly, on the flip side of your working together postcard, is there anything on it?
No, there's not.
I was just wondering whether you could put a list of all the associations and their websites or telephone numbers. Because that would be a way that you could help without us all providing brochures. It would be an easy way for families to get support from the organization that was applicable to them on a document that's already being sent out by the board and given out to every family that needs it. So it would be a way of fulfilling two needs at once.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. Thank you. For us to consider that, I guess I'd need to make sure that your information about your association is as current as possible. If you're wondering what we have for your info, if you go to page 90 of the draft plan for next year, that shows all of your contact info. For most of you, most of your associations, it's most of you don't have a website. Most of you have email. I think you all have email there. So is that the information that you would want there, or would you rather have the website? Because the board website and the plan already have your individual contact info, which could change at any time, right? If you step away from SEAC, or depending on the year of change for SEAC. Whereas if on the back of the postcard, if there was a website that's more
Stable, yeah.
Stable. Thank you. It's not going to change. Then I think that would be the better info.
Yeah, I think the best thing would be the just the website, the name of the organization, and the website, and then people can find whatever they need. Always contact details on the websites. It doesn't have to be amended when people change, and so I think that would be by far the easiest.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that. I'd need you to make sure that you provide that information so it's really up to date to Lorna, and then we could, when we get to the electronic version of this, we can always have updated anytime. But the print version that we give to parents, once we get to a new print run, is when we would put that on the back. Great idea. Thanks. Other ideas on how to raise parent awareness of associations?
I'll chime in. At one point, we talked about perhaps recording the presentations that are made by the different associations so that we can have that available to parents. So I'm just putting it out there. We had a great presentation from Learning Disabilities Association, and I'm wondering if others would be able to do something similar. And that could be the power, or at least the slides could be made available for parents. So I'm just putting it out to the group. And this would be kind of, not just the contact info, but also, what kind of supports or services or programs your association offers, maybe some other links to other resources, that sort of thing. Okay. So Sophia's asking if that would be posted on the SEAC website. Probably that's the best spot. Mark, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, yeah, for sure. We could find a way to link it across the, the information, your individual contact and those video links. We could do those. Of what you presented at SEAC, or it's just a copy of your slide deck, if that's what you make available. Either way would be fine. If you choose not to do a presentation at SEAC, but would still like your slide deck available and post it on the website, we could do that.
Yeah, and then Deidre suggested that that information could be made available to CERTs to make available to parents of the students that they are supporting. Allison, you have a hand up? And Deidre, I'm just wondering, are you having technical difficulties? Or no? Go ahead, Allison.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So just another thing, I was wondering, Mark, do you ever have, well, I'm sure you do, but I mean, events where you bring all the certs together? I wonder whether there's an opportunity that the associations could present to all the certs so that we could make sure that the people who are actually informing parents are fully aware of what each organization does and what they have on, even if it's, if you've got some other event and there's a lunch and learn or wherever, we can just have booths or something where we could access the people who are actually telling the parents where to go.
I had to catch myself and make sure I heard you say booths and not booze, but for the lunch and learns. So I appreciate that many SEAC members are new. We've actually done that quite a few times and Diane from LDH has been one of the association reps who has come to our CERT learning sessions and spoken to CERTs about LDH. So we've done that several times, but I can't remember if we've done it recently or not. So certainly whatever our learning looks like for staff in the future, lots of unknowns. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. I'm just not sure how. But certainly we would welcome associations to come and share with staff. You're right. It's a great thing to do. It's been well received in the past.
Any other or suggestions? Okay. Mark, if you could just nod, I'm wondering, for the approval of the special education plan, do we need to make a formal motion, or was going around and getting the approval sufficient?
The regulation says that the trustees do have to know whether or not SEAC supports the plan. It doesn't state that there has to be a specific formal motion that I'm aware of.
Okay.
So I think what's important is that trustees know where SEAC stands on the plan for next year. So I think that was pretty clear tonight.
Okay, good. Thank you. Lorna's remembering that we did have a formal motion, but that might have been not necessary. Maybe in the past it was simply acknowledging support and non-support.
I don't think whether we drafted a motion and did another vote, we certainly can if that's the will of the group. I'm not sure it really matters, but I appreciate that some people might want that. Do you want to ask the question of whether or not people want to do this again with a formal motion?
Yes. Okay, so maybe just a quick hand state no.
Do you want anyone to speak up to say they would like
we speak up and
a formal motion? Anybody want a formal motion on the approval of the plan?
Okay, so I take it as we're good with going around and gaining approval, and that's what we'll relay to the Board of Trustees. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so thanks for your ideas on promoting the associations. We will, if you could share your website information with Lorna, and then when we do our next run of those postcards, we will make sure that we include that information. In the meantime, while we are in a virtual format for school resource team meetings, and we share that postcard electronically, if we have that information now, we can include that. And then also, if you have a slide deck that you'd like linked to your contact info on the board website, please include that, because we will add that information there as well. And then we will look at our future training opportunities with our special education resource teachers. And when we look at those, we'll look at inviting you to have the opportunity to share there as well. I think those are the things that I heard tonight. Was that right? Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think that the general consensus was that what we had done was enough. So I'd like to move on with the agenda to item 3.0, which is the SEAC discussion period. And I'm wondering if, and this is a question that I'd like to pose to the member associations about what they are learning from their families about the online learning. If there's anything that you would like to bring forward to this discussion.
Lou, if you don't mind, maybe I'll clarify that the ministry just released a opportunity for input for parents. I think it was just yesterday. And so they are asking parents to provide that input. It's on the ministry's website, and you can do it by email. But I think we were thinking that is there something that we'd like to do collectively as SEAC tonight that we could provide input to the ministry about that. And maybe if I could add, as a board, we are doing a survey. We hope to have it out probably next week to parents. And we're going to be asking about continuity of learning, what that's looked like, and what families would like going forward in September. Also about engagement, because we have a wide range of engagement of students, which is challenging for us, and about well-being. So we're going to be surveying students and families about those three areas as well, just for you to be aware. So, but Lou, I think you're asking about the ministry's input and what that might look like from SEAC, what we might be providing.
Correct. Okay, are there any hands?
I think you've got Margot and Allison and
then,
Deidre, I think.
Okay, Margot?
Yeah, so I'm kind of following on from what Mark was saying, in that we recognize that the Ministry of Education has requested feedback, particularly from CX across the province. And what I am hoping is that we as a group, particularly from the different associations representing the different needs of the students, would be able to collectively create a letter from SEAC. So I know that they are asking, I think Sophia just said that your son's school sent out the request for individual feedback, which I think is great, but I think having a unified letter from SEAC would be a great addition to the feedback. The minister was saying he was working with SEAC across the province. So I think it would be nice if Halton SEAC was able to formulate a letter representing the needs from the different associations and ensuring that the needs of the students in the schools are met. Over.
So Margot, to clarify, were there specific questions?
No, so there is a website that you can go to that is the request for feedback website. But they're just asking they're asking from parents, they're asking from SEAC, they're asking from school boards and trustees, what we see as the best way moving forward to ensure our students are feeling safe and learning to the best of their ability. So again, I think what was briefly mentioned, we only heard from it briefly, is that the minister has asked specifically for CX input. And if I'm right, I know, Mark, I kind of dropped an email about this morning. Maybe you could expand on looking at how we as a group can collectively write a letter to the minister expressing the needs of the students with exceptionalities from Halton.
So really, I think the question before you is how to gather your input so that you can speak as one Halton SEAC voice to the ministry. Is that the right question that we're asking? Is how to do this?
I think so.
So if that's the case, then I imagine that none of us want to write this collectively right now tonight. But is there interest in either sending your ideas to Lorna that she could pull together, and maybe Joanna and Lou could look at as chair and vice chair?
Sorry to interrupt, guys. Just to clarify, I think I just looked at the email I was sent from my son's school. The ministry's looking for feedback about going back to school.
Correct.
And I think the board's looking for feedback for the distant learning experience, right?
Correct. Well, yeah. So there are two different questions with input being gathered in two different ways.
Right. Okay.
Another option is to create a shared Google Doc where you could add your ideas to, instead of it going through Lorna, and so to have a deadline by which everyone would put their ideas on that doc, and then Joanna and Lou would look at pulling that together into one input from the Halton SEAC. Any other ideas on how to do this?
I like that idea, Mark. James and Deidre?
I think that it's very, I teach deaf students, so, and some of these deaf students have multiple exceptionalities. And I think if you're in this field, that students of this nature thrive best when you're in the classroom with them. And I would expect a lot of teachers would agree with me that this is a huge deficit for the student to be online, because they're lacking that interaction with the teacher, which is so critical. So I think moving forward, going back to school in the fall, it would be advisable to possibly stagger the students entering the school so that lower grades and special education get priority, and higher grades and higher students would be staggered to later arrival, just so that you could keep the social distancing and you can do it very systematically and step by step, so the students know, or at least you could try to encourage them to try to keep the distance. Because let's face it, elementary schools, it's going to be very difficult to keep kindergarten and grade 1 and grade 2, those kids away from each other. It's going to be very, very hard. So that would be what I would suggest. I would suggest that to get the students back to school, that it be done in a very systematic, slow approach, phasing in probably with the highest need students first, and the students with the lesser needs go later into the school year as things get phased in, and possibly continue with online learning until they can be brought back physically into the school.
Okay, Deidre, do you have a question or comment?
Yes, I'm just wondering whether or not there's going to be an option for an online, kind of what James just saying, online learning opportunity in conjunction with a physical learning opportunity. So some kids may be going and some kids maybe aren't going, dependent upon either what the opportunity is at home or not at home, or the needs of the child, I guess, or the family per se. But I do think that obviously for some of our exceptionalities, this is a totally different experience for a lot of learners. So there's going to be different needs for a lot of our kids. So I do think that we can't just sit here tonight and all say what each one of our groups needs, because I think it takes a while to put all the thoughts down and then put it all together. But I think that's a significant a letter that has to go forth to the ministry. Yeah, but I think it should be done, definitely.
Okay, so maybe what I'll suggest is that with Lorna's help, we'll create a Google Doc with maybe 2 columns. One will be looking at feedback that you've heard from the members of your association around distance learning and online learning and some of the challenges and issues. And then in the other column, think about your return to school ideas and what you would suggest. And I suspect that the one will lead to the other. So if everybody will be able to think about their members, think about their association, and hone in on that and provide those that kind of feedback and those sorts of thoughts looking to the future, then we'll be able to create a good summary with some good advice to the minister. Does that sound reasonable? And Allison, you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think that's a great idea. I'd like to go and actually put this question out to our association members on Facebook page and actually get input from our members as to what they would like to see happen. I think one of the things that we've learned very clearly is that the online model may work well for some kids who are struggling at school, and it may be an absolute disaster for others. So I think it's very individualized, and we need to hear the voices of everybody. And there may be, I think going forward, it's going to have to be some kind of combination. But we need to hear from our members, and we can feed that information back.
That sounds great. And what kind of timelines do you think are reasonable, Allison, for like when would you want to close it down for input so that then we have some time to work on a response? And Mark, what's the deadline for the ministry?
I will take a look at their website right now.
So Mark, am I on? I don't know if I'm unmuted or not. Oh, you're not. So I
We
know
can hear you.
they're having a response to the public by the end of June. So I would guess they would want feedback before that.
Yeah, and just to jump in from my perspective, I mean, I would say it would be less than a week to get feedback. I mean, people either want to give feedback or they don't.
Right.
Just having it up for a long period of time doesn't necessarily generate more interest. So I think it's important for people now. And I think the opportunity is to say something now. And while that may change over time, I think we offer the opportunity, and within a week, we can finish it. And then we bring forward all the feedback, and SEAC can form a group response.
Yeah, the ministry's website doesn't have a due date in terms of that. It just says an opportunity for input. We did send a message to all families, the one that was referred to earlier, that went out to all families today, and includes the information and a link for the email to send it to.
Okay, so if we aim to have the associations provide us with their input, into both areas, how things have gone with distance online learning to date, and then advice, suggestions for the return to school in September. If we could aim to have that, I'm looking at the calendar, is next Wednesday or Friday. Is that too late? Because then we'll need some time to consolidate all the feedback and write a letter or report. And Margot, is it that the ministry wants our input by the end of June?
So by the end of June, they are making an announcement as to what they are looking at for September.
So we'll have to get something into the ministry at least by the 22nd at the latest, I would think.
So, and again, just for some guidance with this, I know that as looking at the trustees report and even the report from Halton, the school board, as far as the administration, I know we're trying to focus on certain areas. So looking at well-being, looking at safety. So maybe trying to think about those different sort of high-level concerns that you have and how they relate to students under your guidance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so sorry, Allison suggested Friday. Do you mean this Friday or next Friday? This Friday, the 5th. Okay. So if all the associations could put out a call to their members asking for their feedback around how, what were some of the issues, challenging realities of distance learning and online learning for the students.
So sorry, Joanna, but again, I think what the government is wanting is using maybe the experience that we're having now to guide the practice. So although there's going to be bumps and hiccups now, we only have a month left to school. So I think what the government is trying, or what the minister is trying to look at, is how we can use our experience, understanding, and knowledge of what happened since March to inform best practice for starting in September.
Right. So that first piece is the reflection on how things have gone, and then the second piece is some advice, suggestions for return to school in September.
I think,
and then,
by the way, sorry, Allison, that Friday, I think Melissa made a note of it. I think Friday is quite tight. I would almost want to say by Monday, even, just giving people that extra bit of time just to get their ducks in a row.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Oh, I can't see. Sounds good.
We'll aim for feedback by end of June 8th. And it'll go straight into the shared Google Docs so everybody can see what's happening, and we'll keep our finger on the pulse. And then Lou and I will look at what's been presented, and we'll work on consolidating that for a response to the minister. Okay, so we have a plan.
That sounds like quite a sound plan.
Great.
Okay. Okay, if I could move along on the agenda, I'd like to move to the communication to SEAC and the superintendent's report. Mark?
Thanks, Lou. So I'm going to touch on a few of these items. So number 2 in my report, summer learning and supports for students. The ministry recently announced some funding and direction for school boards. So one of those is summer school, which we offer each year. All of those programs that we typically offer, whether they be credit granting or reach ahead or for students in elementary grades, all of that will be virtual. We've made that decision. So we are working with our continuing ed staff about how we can provide additional supports for students with special needs in those courses. So our programming for students at SILAPS will be virtual this year as well. The ministry has also provided funding for mental health supports for students over the summer. And they've been specific about students who are currently receiving service and for those that may be in crisis. So and if you can appreciate, this memo only came out Friday from the ministry. So we're working pretty hard and pretty fast to design all of these things. I can't give you details right now. If you do have questions, I know that Sean has been working with staff on that, and he can take those questions when I'm done, perhaps. And then also the ministry would like us to provide and has provided funding for us to provide programming opportunities for transitions at the end of August. So we are working on that also so that we can support students. We know students with special needs need more support for transitions, and we're really glad that the ministry is recognizing this with the students being out for these past 3 months. So we're looking at the design of that as well. I'll move on then. And James touched on the closing of the Aaron Oak program, which is really too bad, but that's a result of the ministry changing its fee-for-service model. And Aaron Oak can't support that program anymore. Just it's not feasible for them, which is too bad. I touch on our special athletes track meet. We know that this has been a real highlight for our students and families at the end of the year, and so we're decided to do this virtually. And so you can see that there's an opportunity there for families to either take a pic or a video of their child doing an activity and submitting that, and then we're going to pull it together into a sort of video presentation that'll be pulled together and posted on June 19th. And we'll be sure to share that link with SEAC. And I've already talked about the budget, and so I'll stop there and take any questions about my update.
Sophia and Allison have questions.
Hi, just a very quick question. I noticed that it mentioned about having increased online opportunities for summer school, and yet when I went onto the Gary Allen website today, pretty much every single course was full, apart from the ones that were to basically boost your marks. Will you be offering more programming, or I mean, I know this is new, so will there be new programming offered, or is this just it's full now.
So, Allison, I think your question is specific to high school credit granting courses. Is that right?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. So maybe we could connect you with Gary Allen is our alternative ed school that runs summer school as well. So maybe we'll have one of the Gary Allen staff contact you about that. But that's
so is this different then from the funding that was just given to do more? I guess that was where I assumed it was all going to be because it was online.
Yeah. So the ministry provided funding. They provide funding every year for summer school, right? It's a per pupil grant, and so they provided additional funding to open it up more broadly to give more options to students because of the COVID situation. So I'm gonna hand it over to Sean actually, because I know he's been meeting with the principal of Gary Allen, Andrea Taylor, and we have another meeting with her and David Bogue, our associate director who oversees that as well. Sean and I are meeting with them on Thursday morning. So I'll hand it over to Sean right now.
Okay.
You're on mute, Sean.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
Okay.
As you can appreciate, we just got this Friday, so we are working very hard to get things in place. It's two separate pieces. The one you're referring to, as Mark mentioned, is the summer school credit-bearing courses, and that's through Con Ed. The funding we have for student services is specifically for our department, and we're looking at opening up a number of different opportunities for students through multiple grades. And the distinction is going to be, rather than a summer camp or summer school, it's a summer learning opportunity. So if you can imagine students in life skills programs continuing the learning that they've been having so far. Students in the CPP program could be for students with LD aligned with their AT. We're anticipating almost a three-tiered approach in one. The latter half of August is going to be for transitions. The ministry is very clear on that part, wanting to make sure we're getting students ready for whatever that's going to look like in September. That one's a little bit more challenging right now because we still haven't landed on what that's going to look like. So our focus right now is the July startup and what we can offer, accessing what's already being provided. There's some great things happening in our self-contained classes from our classroom teachers. So the IPLs are reaching out, seeing what's there, what we can bring into the summer, and then offering these out to the system. And could be 2 weeks, could be 4 weeks. I think the spirit of what the ministry is doing is saying we want to continue the connection with families. We don't want them to feel as if they're still isolated through this summer gap. And so we're looking at reaching as many students as possible. And the virtual environment really gives us an opportunity to do that. Obviously not the optimum. We want to be in classrooms with the students, but short of that, opportunities for FaceTime, working in smaller groups with the students. And we're trying to capture as many opportunities as we can. Literally just had 3 meetings today with different groups about this. So we've got our blind low vision team involved, our DHOH team involved, LD, life skills, secondary. Like, we're trying to capture everything we possibly can and see what we can get out in the system over the next couple of weeks. Because basically we have 3 weeks to get this in place and make sure that we're set and have the staff for this to support the students. So it's not specific details that I can give you right now, obviously, but I can tell you that there's a lot happening. And the good part about this is, because of what we've been doing over the last 2 months, we have a lot of things already in place that we can tweak for the summer, working with students, and even refining in anticipation with what the new year is going to look like.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Sophia, I think you're next.
Thanks, Mark. So that's good. I had a similar question. I know every year before the summer starts, I always ask about what kind of camps and learning opportunities are available to our kids, especially kids with Down syndrome. The gap over the summer is brutal, and a lot of our kids are really struggling now with the home learning. As I mentioned before too, what I'm hearing from families is there's a lot of inconsistency. a lot of inconsistency with some teachers are doing synchronous learning and some kids are getting that once or twice a week. And then there's other teachers that are doing the classroom synchronous learning with the whole class. And there's really no accommodation for the kids with Down syndrome. So they're completely disconnected. So again, the summer opportunities sound amazing, but my question and concern is always the fact, similar to what Allison just said, is that these opportunities are offered and then they fill up within a couple minutes, and then it's really inequitable how and where it's offered. So specifically the AT camps that were offered every summer, but again, like we've been trying to get in for the last 3 years, and we never have been able to, and many of our families have not been able to. So for sure, I think this will be online, so hopefully it'll open up to more, but how will it be offered? Just so when we're sharing with our families, they can keep an eye out for it.
So I can address that again. The short answer right now is we're still working on that piece. We're going to get messages out to the certs to relay to their families. Obviously, students in self-contained classes and students that are associated with certs are going to know right away. If you have our Twitter feed, Student Services has one specifically, so I would encourage you to keep an eye on that piece. And you're right about the virtual environment. Unlike bricks and mortar where we're limited to space, the potential is greater. So we're trying to reach as many students as possible to really maximize what the ministry is trying to get us to do. Beyond that, right now, the messaging hasn't been formalized because we don't know what we're going to be able to offer. But it's going to be a broad spectrum approach to getting the messages out there so that people have enough time to enroll. I'm going to say this now. I don't anticipate turning people down. I think given the question will be, how do we reach as many people as possible? We know the numbers of students we have in our board who are in self-contained classes, who have exceptionalities that aren't in self-contained but could use this. It might change how we offer it. It might be a morning and an afternoon group.
Right.
So that it, rather than one group in a day, the other piece is going to be the number of staff that we can get involved over the summer with this as well.
And then will the assistive tech camp still be offered then as well, or?
Assistive tech is still going to, again, camp's kind of a strange word given the environment it's going to be. It will be virtual, but yes, assistive tech will be there. Something specific for students with autism as well. Like we really are trying to reach everybody, and we are working every day really hard to try to figure out how this is going to look and what we can offer.
That's awesome. And so I guess so certs would be the best point of contact for that. Like when I share this with my families, because many of them were upset because last year, same thing, I told them about the camp, assistive tech camp, and then many of them said, well, we didn't even hear about it. Our certs never told us a date. They didn't seem to know. So this time the certs are going to find out about all of this.
Yes, that I can tell you for sure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That sounds great.
Thanks.
I think Diane is next.
I just had a question, and I'm not sure what this falls under. For the children that have struggled with online learning, whether they're children with special needs or children who just don't do well with online learning, how are they going to, or how are you going to make up the lost content? I know at the start of the school year, there's normally some review that happens, but this has been a fair chunk of time that some kids may have struggled with the online learning. So what's that going to look like, or how are those children who have missed a large portion of the content, how are they going to catch up to be able to have that as a foundation for the grade they're going into in the fall?
Great question, Diane. We were very conscious of that in the instructional design that we're looking at for teachers for the fall. I'm talking broadly, not just students with special needs, but all students, right? I think is what you're talking about. Is first, and there's quite a range there, right? We have students who have been very engaged and moved along really well with the curriculum, and we have students who have been barely engaged at all and done very little learning and we have everybody in between. So teachers are going to have to be, very conscious of that coming into the fall and figuring out how to meet the needs of those students. And right now, that's in an unknown environment. So I hope you can appreciate that. We're trying to plan for various scenarios for the fall, and hopefully the ministry will be able to give us clear direction, whether that be in July or August. I think it's going to depend a lot on the infection rate in the community, and the trending of that infection rate. So if they can give us clear direction on where we're going, then we can move ahead with the scenario planning we've been doing. But we're very aware of that gap in learning that's occurred for many students not being in class these past 3 or 4 months. So we're very conscious of that as we move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I think, Sean, if you can maybe type in the Student Services Twitter handle that Sophia's asking for there in the text in the side, and then Melissa's next.
Hi there. I'm just wondering, lots of talk about students online, and my question is about the paraprofessionals in our board and what their expectation is for them in terms of meeting the needs of spec ed support. So my clientele of families receives a lot of OT and PT support, a lot of speech, a lot of paraprofessionals that come into the building. And speaking from my own personal experience and others, we've had zero contact with any PT, OT, any of the paraprofessionals employed by the board to service these students. So you can imagine in 3.5 months, we haven't had any new stretches. We haven't had a follow-up on this. We haven't had a fitting for the standards that have now, it really was up to the individual teachers who've done an amazing job at making sure that first week that all of the equipment could be, or first few weeks anyway, all of the equipment could be picked up so that the students would have some continuity at home. You can imagine that many of these families at their homes don't have walkers, don't have trikes, don't have all of the equipment to keep these kids physically able and physically healthy. And I've just been very disappointed at the sort of paraprofessionals and the lack of any kind of support and sort of connection. Haven't received a single phone call from anybody seeing how, equipment is doing, and that with the exception of the teacher, who again, arguably not their job to, fit a stander or fit a bike, etc. So just wondering about that.
Maybe I'll start, and then Sean, if you could jump in. Our intent, Melissa, has been that the teacher be the conduit of communication between home and school. I appreciate your comments that the teacher doesn't necessarily need to be the expert in those different services, nor can they be. Some of those services, well, most, I think the ones you're referring to, OT, PT, those aren't school board staff. Those are services provided by our community partners. And, we're working with them around what might service look like going forward when, they haven't been able to work directly with students. And so what can connection look like with families and parents going forward? Maybe I'll hand it over to Sean if he's anything to add.
Nothing really beyond that. We are working on a plan to send out messages to the schools about those kinds of equipment, and our goal to get as much into the hands of students and families as we can. We've adopted and changed some of our past practices given the current conditions so that parents aren't having to go through the same things to get the devices at home. But the process, as you can imagine, there's a lot of material out there. And just the tracking piece needs to be at the school level, and we'll be a support for the schools with how to manage that.
Just to add to that is that, my clientele of families was recently, not only are all camps canceled, and an online environment for, our life skills classes, in some cases is working okay for some of the students, but for others is not. Not only are all camps canceled for the summer, but in addition, respite, any kind of respite services that these families would be receiving have been classified under camps and therefore have been canceled as well. So you're looking at families that have spent the last 10 weeks, intensively with their student and, or with their child, sorry. And just to say that, things are very difficult. And I think we need to do a little bit more. And, the teachers running ragged and the teachers, and it's certainly in our case anyway, doing a fantastic job. But I think we have to remember these families, even when we're planning for next year. I think somebody mentioned about, bringing in our most vulnerable. I mean, these kids really, my worry is that because of the social distancing, you're right, kids that need to be changed 3 times a day, I think they'll be the very easy ones to say, oh, sorry, we can't have you come back because we can't get anybody close enough to you to do those changes or to feed or to, change, any kind of medical equipment that can happen. And I think it's we have to be very careful to make sure that their needs are met, even with social distancing. I don't want this clientele of student to be forgotten just because they have needs that are more intimate, let's say. That's it.
Great comments, Melissa. We have echoed those in our discussions. We're looking at a lot of models that are going on right now in different parts of the world as kids return, and in many of them, the students who go back first and go back full time right away are students with special needs. Specifically the profiles that you're talking about. In some jurisdictions, those students were kept on going to school, recognizing that the challenges of those students staying home. Some jurisdictions, they just kept going. All of these are ministry decisions. There's been no indication that individual boards will be making these decisions. So I think it's really important that you include this feedback in that document that you talked about earlier about contributing to and sending to the ministry as feedback from the HDSBCAC.
Yeah, for sure. I will do that.
Are there any more hands in the chat box?
I don't see any.
Okay, then I'll move on to the association reports. Are there any association reports, Lorna?
So Allison has something for us, as does Melissa.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to let you know that the Learning Disabilities Association has been running one-on-one support sessions for students with learning disabilities and or ADHD over the last 4 weeks. We'll be continuing for another 4 weeks with some funding from Hamilton, Burlington, and the Halton region. There are a few spots still available if there are people in need, and this is there to support students who are struggling with the online learning model, particularly in literacy and basic numeracy, and to support the learning that's going on in the classroom. The other thing is there was a comment about tech. LearnStyle has come up with a relationship with Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario. So LearnStyle offers tech or tutoring and technology. All families are, if you go through the Learning Disabilities Association, our website basically, all families are entitled to a free one-on-one session on technology use and how to use the technology that your child may have. There's then a discounted rate of $40 a session that is available for families. So if you're struggling with any of the technology that may be used in the board, LearnStyle has offered this program through the Learning Disabilities Association to ensure that families have access to some support at this time. So that is available through our website. Thank you.
Okay, and Melissa.
Hi. So this week is actually National Accessibility Week from May 31st to June 6th. Tomorrow in particular, June 3rd, I put the hashtags there already. I hit enter quicker than I anticipated. Is a time for Canadians to promote inclusion and accessibility in our communities and workplace and celebrate the contributions of Canadians with disabilities. So you're encouraged to wear a red shirt to support people living with disabilities, accessibility and inclusion, and post it on those. I posted the hashtags there that you can post your photo and just support accessibility for all in Ontario. That's it.
Thank you, Melissa. And Sophia.
Hey, so June 20th is the Halton Down Syndrome Association's virtual Walk for Down Syndrome. It's our biggest fundraiser. We do it annually. This time we're going virtual. So yeah, to share that. So we're trying our best. It's going to be a little bit tough to be doing it online, but it's happening. That's all.
That's great. Any other updates from associations? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Got some nice hashtags to tweet out and support. Okay, over to you, Lou.
Okay, well, moving on to the next agenda item, which is the trustees' report. Now, I know that Margot has left the meeting saying that she didn't have anything, but I'm wondering if there's anything from the other trustees.
Yes, I have a trustee update report.
Okay.
And this is the end of the school year coming up shortly. I'm just going to provide a status update on where things are at. Okay, the Board of Trustees actually followed SEAC in adopting the Google Meets platform for the board meetings, and this has made a positive difference and has been well received by all. The meeting focus on updates on response to the pandemic, but are now turning focus to planning for a return to school in September. This will be directed by the Ministry of Education under the guidance from Public Health. As you heard earlier, a number of surveys will be coming out from both HDSB and the ministry, seeking feedback on online learning, how that's been working out for our students and their families, and the realities of school closures and distance learning. Several things had to be put on hold, as you well know. Just a reminder that the Milton Southwest No. 1 High School boundary review, the work on that will resume in September with community consultations scheduled for the fall. Information about the process and the various scenarios are available to those interested on the hdsb.ca website. You recall that earlier in the year, both Margot and I provided you with updates on the work that was taking place on creating a new multi-year plan for the Halton District School Board. This work had to be put on hold as well until the fall. However, the impact of the pandemic on education and our students will give us lots to think about as we reflect, and perhaps will help to shape a few concepts as well. Mark already mentioned earlier that due to the pandemic, the release of the grants for student needs, which is the main portion of the funding for the school boards from the Ministry of Education, has been delayed. And the budget submission deadlines, therefore, have also been delayed until roughly mid to late August. So that necessitates some work on the budget that will have to happen during the summer months. The Student Senate held its final meeting by video with more than 50 student senators from across the district. Main work goal of this meeting was to finalize a motion around the declaration of a climate emergency. Student trustees will be presenting their motion at the board meeting tomorrow night. The meeting was also a lovely end to the Senate for the school year and was full of farewells. 2 of our student trustees will be ending their term. I should say both of our student trustees will be ending their term. Olivia will be entering grade 12 in the fall, and Matthew is graduating. And so we wish him all the best in his post-secondary endeavors. And finally, June is a month of celebrations. So we continue in this tradition, and we will be celebrating virtually all graduations at a specified date and time for each school, including a virtual prom that's scheduled for June 11th. Also, HDSB staff retirements and the closure of Bateman High School will be celebrated virtually. These are contributing grad messages to the virtual celebrations to honor all the students in their areas. And that's it for us, unless I'm missing anything. Trustees L. Harrison and Garrett's, please do chime in. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now moving on to committee reports. I will check.
Deidre?
Yes, hello. I attended the May 26th steering committee for equality and inclusion, and there wasn't a whole lot that we discussed. We met a couple of new members, but there was a little bit of talk in regards to the student census. And there's one piece of information that I kind of want to have included the members of SEAC in, which is census working group, and they're going to be doing some outreach sessions. They want to reach out to community groups, and there's a contact form. And I'd like to include members of SEAC that would be interested in having some discussions revolving around the student census, what it's for, what the process is, how the information will be used and collected with this student census working group. So I would need the okay, or I would like the okay. I, of course, could just pass along your group names and contact information, but I'd rather approach you first to make sure everybody's okay with that. But I would actually like to include each and every group of SEAC to be included in this. So if you'd all just say, give me a yes or a no, and I just take your name and your email address from the information that we have from SEAC, and they would be reaching out to you to discuss what will be happening next year with the student census, and just gather some information, share it with you, and answer any questions that you might have in regards to the information.
So Deidre, this nicely builds on the presentation that we had from Equity Inclusive Education Committee about the student census, right?
Yes, and at least I like to see that they're reaching out, which is really nice. Any questions that they may have or that you may have regarding what this information will be used for and how it's being kept and gathered. And it's kind of timely considering world events at the moment. So it's quite important, I think, that especially that we have our voices heard and that we're part of the conversation.
Well, thank you for that feedback.
So perhaps anybody who's interested, maybe reach out to Deidre and share their contact information so she can pass it on to the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Can I move on to item number 5, the next agenda? Okay. Moving on.
Yes. I just wanted to remind, and actually we had a bit of a conversation about that already around the association presentations. and making that information available for our families in the school system. So I just want to remind everybody that we do have that invitation, that if you'd like to think over the summer and book a date for your association presentation for the fall, that would be great. And then that info, those slides, whatever you happen to prepare, can be uploaded to our SEAC portion of the website for families to access. And also, we do have the Q&A document still live and circulating. So if you collect any unique kinds of questions from your members relative to the pandemic and school closures and distance learning, that you continue to add those to the list. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We have now exhausted our agenda, but before we adjourn, Joanna and I would like to wish you all a safe and happy summer, and we hope to see you all in September. And I now call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.